We're live.
Great. Welcome. This is Law at the Margins webinar on Native Americans leading in the environmental justice fight. We're really excited to host this particular panel on Earth Day. Even though Earth Day is a new celebration, all of us knew that Native American communities and indigenous communities have long fought for and advocated for the environment way before Earth Day. Today, we are excited to have an amazing, I have to say amazing, group of panelists because I am in awe of the fact that I have these four leaders today. And I want to thank Dayna Jones, who is a first-year law student at Lewis Clark Law School, for sponsoring and putting this program together. The Native American Law Students Association at Lewis and Clark is sponsoring this program with Law at the Margins. We know that climate change and issues of environmental justice are unique threats to Native American indigenous ways of life. Detrimental effects of mining, fossil fuel extraction, water access and contamination, wetlands preservation, and improper federal recognition of tribal lands have all been contributors in stripping away the basic human and sovereign rights of Native American community. Today's panelists are Dallas Goldtooth, Dakota and Dayna, part of the Keep It in the Ground campaign organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network. You may have seen him and his father as part of the Paris climate change activism. Also, we have with us Kanahus Manuel. She is a warrior, a full-time teacher, activist, and traditional birth keeper. She raised awareness and is known mostly for her work around the Mount Poly gold copper mining tailings spill, one of the worst mining disasters in Canadian history. In fact, she is often noted as a target for the imperial medals because of her activism. So her work is getting noticed by the corporate actors. We also have with us Pennie Opal Plant, who lives in San Pablo, California, has been an artist, activist for Native and environmental rights for over 30 years. She's the co-founder of Movement Rights and Idle No More San Francisco Bay. I also see Tara Houska, who is the citizen of Clcik First Nation and a tribal rights attorney based in Washington, D.C. So the format of the program will be that we will hear from each of our panelists about the work that they're engaged in, and then we will have a moderated discussion amongst the panelists in terms of moving forward around Native American rights. And then we'll open it up to our participants to ask questions. I encourage our participants to use the chat feature. Introduce yourselves, ask the questions, and at the end, towards the about 1:30 Eastern Time, we're going to open up to the Q&A. You can use hashtag #LawAtMargins to give your comments and questions. Again, I'd like to invite Dallas to begin us off to provide a context to a lot of the environmental justice work, and particularly your framing that this is not just about environment, that this is a broader issues that the indigenous community and Native community have been leading for many time. Thank you, Dallas.
Oh, thank you very much for the introduction. Everyone can hear me fine?
Yes.
We're good?
Yes.
Yep, we're good.
Awesome. My name is Dallas Goldtooth, and I'm Dakota and Dayna from the Chaumtoli Huq, also known as the Lower Sioux Indian community in southwest Minnesota. And I'm happy to be here with each and every one of you. Here, you know, technologically, we're all in the same place, and this is a beautiful experience. I am the Keep It in the Ground campaign organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network. I was previously the Keystone XL campaign organizer, but thankfully and happily, I can say I'm no longer that. You know, I no longer have a title because we won that campaign. Much love to all the frontline communities in that campaign and all our other frontline communities and leaders and organizers across Turtle Island and across the planet who are resisting extractive development and infrastructure on their lands. So today's call, or this discussion here, this webinar, is to kind of talk about environmental justice and its impacts on Indian country and indigenous peoples and frontline communities. the Indigenous Environmental Network has been around for over 2 decades, supporting in frontline communities in their fights, whether it's a struggle against hard rock mining, oil development, fracking issues, natural gas, clear-cut mining, or even nuclear waste deposit repositories. There's a plethora of issues that are affecting Native peoples, and it all comes down to protecting the land and the water, and our ability as First Nations people, as Indigenous peoples, to self-determine our future on our terms and to advocate for true sovereignty as Indigenous peoples. So, the environmental justice movement is nothing new, and a lot of impacted communities across the country, across the globe, have been advocating for their ability to determine what's in our water, what's in the air, what's impacting their bodies. And as Indigenous peoples, our fight is a continuation of that, but also added into that is our sovereign rights as the original inhabitants of this land, and the recognition of our inherent tribal rights, our treaty rights, are all part of that same process. So I'm thankful that I was able to be asked to be joined here. My daughter's here with me, and I'm about to give her some apples. Apologies. All right, there you go. And this is what it's about. Is what kind of future are we creating for our next 7 generations? What are we going to not only talk about? What are we not just? It's not just about what we're fighting against. It's what we're fighting for. And that is the reason why we do what we do. We had a tremendous opportunity to take 45 Indigenous frontline leaders from across North America to Paris this last December for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. And the reason we went there is that, this is an international agreement talking about climate change, and that we know that Indigenous peoples tend to be on the forefront of climate change, not just on the receiving end of sea level rising or loss of traditional habitat or animal impacts to what animals are still around, but then also we tend to be on the front line of the extraction. So we wanted to make sure that we're there in that conversation, inside and outside of the conference, to advocate for the rights of Indigenous peoples have to be acknowledged in any discussion about climate change. And it's imperative that we look towards the solutions being developed by our communities, within our communities, solutions that we've been enacting for a millennia, for time immemorial, as we follow our original instructions. So many of the folks that you'll see here today, many of the people, my panelists that I'm sharing this techno panel with, can elaborate on that, and how we as Indigenous peoples are trying our very best to stick close, or to renew our original instructions in our relationship to Mother Earth, but then also advocating for all our brothers and sisters on this planet to join us in that effort, that we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground, but then we also have to renew our relationship to Mother Earth back to a more sustainable practice. So that's my little spiel, and I hope that sets the tone of today, and I can talk a little bit more later on about the campaign work that I'm doing right now and some of the communities I have been fortunate enough to work with.
Great. We'll come back to the specifics, and I, at this point, would like to invite Kanahus to talk about sort of her orientation around environmental justice and work on mining, and sort of giving us a framework to understand this issue of environmental justice.
Kanahus Bethki Risquest. Greetings, everybody. My name is Kanahus Bethki. It means red woman in Tanaka. I am Secwepemc and Tanaka from so-called British Columbia, Canada. I'm here to bring my frontline story of what we're dealing with in our territory. As you said, the Mount Poly disaster has wreaked havoc on our territory. In 2014, dumped millions of gallons of toxic mining waste, the tailings, into our pristine watershed. We had a very big, significant area of our territory impacted by that, including one of the largest sockeye salmon spawning grounds left in our territory. Imperial Metals is not only impacting that area of the Mount Polly disaster, but also in the Ruddock Creek project, which is in the headwaters of our glaciers, and another on the headwaters of another really significant sockeye salmon spawning grounds. Our elders have said that it's life or death for our salmon, whether we let these mining and pipeline companies go through into our territory. British Columbia is a very rare piece of land in that we've never signed treaties here in so-called British Columbia. We've never lost our land by war or purchase, and therefore the provincial government is really acting illegal when they were going in and making agreements with these companies to go into our territory, which is unceded. So that's one issue that we're really dealing with right now on a government level, is that the provincial permits that are being issued to these companies to get into our territory, whether it's to build roads for mining companies to go in, discharge permits, open operation permits for these mines to operate on our territory. And what we're seeing is that they're going to find that one Indian out there, Department of Indian Affairs, federally imposed system leadership, and find that one Indian to sign on the dotted line and give them consent. Because as we know, we need collective consent from our entire nation in order for these projects to go through, and these companies are not receiving it. So we've been fighting this this aggressive resource extraction industry, and really bumping heads and doors closing in all directions, because we are not only becoming poor because they're stripping everything off our land, what we sustain ourselves with, but then they're giving the people that are dealing with these mining companies the money and the resources to push these campaigns forward to get these companies in our land. And our women and our grassroots leaders and our grassroots youth and our hunters and our fishermen, the people that are most impacted by these developments or these destruction, are the ones that are taking the front lines. And they're doing whatever means possible to get the word out to our people. One thing that I would like to also address on the impacts on Indigenous communities is the social impacts. Because a lot of times we come from very isolated communities, that these companies are throwing the dollars and the jobs at our own people, and where they're really pushing industry to our young people. And so we see some communities in BC that are full outright fighting mining and then just choose to give up because they refuse to fight against their mothers, their uncles, their nieces and nephews, or even their sons that are working at these jobs. And no one ever addresses this, but it creates so much these dynamics of colonization, and the breeding of this is really impacting our people, and it needs to be addressed, and we need to start looking at alternatives so we can pull our young people away from those jobs. One thing that I really want to address is the water. The water is very important. As you said, as you mentioned, I'm a birth keeper. I'm a traditional midwife.
Yes.
Spend those first months of our life in water. We live and breathe in water. Mm-hmm. Our connection to water is so powerful, and as Native people, and our prayer, our power of prayer and water is really important, and we all need to unite on this issue, because no one can deny that we need clean water. Our salmon is the lifeblood of our people. Our elders say that the salmon DNA is in the blood of us. That's how connected. We have original instructions from Creator, from creation, on our agreements with the salmon and how we're supposed to defend and protect our salmon, and in turn we'll get life through being able to sustain ourselves off that salmon. So when we talk about protecting the environment, we are talking about protecting our life, our whole survival and existence as Indigenous people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kanahus, and thank you. I see that Tara has joined us. So we will continue with sort of opening kind of presentations on the work that each of you are doing. I just want to comment on the chat, we have joining us a phenomenal group of Native activists, folks leading in their communities. And so just to share Law at the Margins philosophy, the panelists catalyze a discussion, but all knowledge production and all discussion is collective and collaborative. And so I encourage each of you to share your thoughts on the chat. That chat is saved. That is a transcript as well as this program. And if each of you would like to, at the Q&A period, I can invite you to also ask your question. So again, I'd like to invite Pennie to share a little bit about her work in San Francisco with No Idle No More. So Pennie.
Thank you. Good morning, relatives. It's still morning here. I am sitting in my office at home looking out over a nice, beautiful storm here in California, which we're so grateful for because we've been in a 5-year drought that's going to take another 4 years of good rain to replenish the soil and the aquifers. I live on occupied Ohlone land, and they are not federally recognized, not federal recognition here, or state recognition here in California, and I have lived here all my life. My family came to the Bay Area in the 1930s, and I can see the hospital I was born in from here. We have 5 refineries right along the northeast San Francisco Bay that largely went unnoticed until our Idle No More group, which kicked off in 2013, March of 2013, decided to conduct a series of healing walks along the refinery corridor. And so that's one of our main projects, is to bring awareness and attention to the toxins and that the refineries put into the air, water, and soil. And we work with frontline community activists in each of the refinery towns to organize. So the first year was so successful that we made a 4-year commitment. We're in our 3rd year now, and we had our first walk of the year last Saturday. So the towns are between 9 and 15 miles apart, and there's one walk each month, April, May, June, and July. And we make beautiful banners and lots of flags. So when we're walking between the refinery communities, we're very, very visible. And there's between 80 and like 150 people that join us. And it's a prayer walk, so we're led by Native people in prayer. And we begin each morning of the walk with prayers for the water. So we collect the water from the Delta, which is where we start in Pittsburgh, California. And we carry that water with us along the walk and sing to it, and we encourage everybody to carry the water for at least 5 minutes on the walk. The walks are led by 1 or 2 staffs, and we have children as young as 7 that complete the entire walks. And so these are people that are making a commitment to the earth, air, water, and soil. We pray at every single toxic site, of which there are unfortunately many along these routes, and we also pray at the refineries. A lot of Bay Area activists join us on these walks, and being with us in this kind of prayerful way has really shifted folks from looking at the system as something that we really need to fight against, which understandably there is that also, but looking at the system from an indigenous viewpoint of being a holistic system that humanity is simply one small part of, and that we're no greater or lesser than a microbe or a whale, and that the system needs to work together, and that Mother Earth herself can do just fine without humanity. And we're the newest relatives who joined this beautiful sacred system of life. And so that's one of our really big projects. We have a little over a year to go. And another project that I'm involved in is the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature, which I say Mother Earth. And we have a tribunal coming up on the Delta because sister here speaking of the Salmon Nation, the Delta is a huge fight because of the water in California. And the one anchor fish there, the Delta smelt, is on the verge of extinction. And if that goes, then the entire ecosystem of the Delta will fail. And so we're working on a tribunal where we're giving the Delta a voice to be able to speak. What does the Delta want? And that's on April 30th. And then I'm also involved in the Indigenous Women of the Americas Defending Mother Earth Treaty, which I would love to talk a little bit more about later. Thank you.
Actually, maybe this is a good time before I bring in Tara to talk about Native American women also as part of this environmental justice piece. So maybe if Pennie, you would like to share that at this point, and then we'll bring in Tara.
Well, I know that Native American women have always been very, very strong. I mean, whether we're on our traditional territories or living in urban environments, we understand that our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers had to go through horrific trials and tribulations in order for us to even be here. And so we all come from long lines of very strong women, otherwise we wouldn't have been born. Mm-hmm. And I think when Idle No More kicked off in late 2012, it started a fire in a lot of Native women, including myself. While I've been an activist for 30 years, when the women of Idle No More stood up and said, "We're done," it did something to me, and I can only speak for myself personally. It did something to me. It gave me permission to come out in a much different way than I have my entire 30 years as an activist. And I see that happening around the world, where, especially around this treaty, where women are coming together and saying, Indigenous women, we are done. We have drawn this line, and we're not going to cross it, and we invite everyone in the world to join us.
Great. So Tara, just introduction of your work, and also how should we frame any conversation around environmental justice and framing of the leadership of Native American communities?
Bonjour, my name is Tara Houska. I'm a tribal rights attorney here based in DC, and I'm a national campaigns director for Honor the Earth, and also an advisor to Bernie Sanders' campaign. A lot of the work that we do personally is actually really closely tied to a series of pipelines that are going through our home communities in northern Minnesota. That's where I'm from. Actually, next week we're going to be crashing a shareholders meeting. It should be a great time. They'll be very happy to see us, I'm sure. Yeah. So I mean, you asked me how do we frame the conversation, and I mean, from my perspective, I do a lot of work that's involved heavily in politics, and how do we succeed interjecting these frontlines activists and frontlines efforts into politics. I've seen a lot of people that are, because our movements have become so powerful, particularly with the Keystone XL pipeline, we really saw the whole society kind of waking up and realizing climate change is not just a fringe issue. This is actually an issue that affects everybody, and these people are right. We should listen to them. So I've seen Capitol Hill kind of waking up to this and realizing this is a voter issue, and realizing that they really need to listen to the constituents who now care about the climate, now care that their communities are going underwater, and that their drinking water is on, they're on drought restrictions and things like that. I was actually just out in California yesterday, and there were signs all over the road, drought restrictions, do not water your lawns or whatever, and it's it's a very real issue. It's pretty hard to say that climate change is not real at this point. So I think that, out here in DC, I see a lot of politicians that are willing to take meetings with, frontlines communities and frontlines activists and listen to them. Still not the point of actually passing legislation that protects the planet, but at least the point of opening the conversation and opening the dialogue. And very interested to hear it, because I mean, this is happening, and this is our futures, and this is, as I saw Dallas's daughter come out and eat an apple. I mean, that's really what we're fighting for, right? This is about the 7th generation, and that's what we're all here for. And at the political level. I mean, all these folks have children too, so they understand this is not just a issue that's, we care about the trees and, the environment. We also care about our futures, and we care about our children and clean drinking water, which is something that we all need. So, I think for folks out there that are looking at these issues and are thinking about, how do I contribute to indigenous movements? How do I contribute to the climate change movement, period? I think there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can go out and hold a sign, or you can go out and, crash a meeting if you want. You can do online contributions in social media. You can also there's high-level versions of that, which is going on Capitol Hill and reminding our congresspersons, hey, we care about this, we care about our environment, we care about our futures, essentially. I think we've seen climate change become a very, very prominent issue in the political debates for the presidency. That's something that comes up every single time. I mean, maybe not on the Republican side, but definitely on the Democrat side. That's an issue that's included in every single debate, and something that resonates with young people, young voters that are very concerned about our futures and very concerned about our ability to thrive and succeed, and actually have a planet and have drinking water, which is pretty important. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here. These are great panelists. I'm happy to see all y'all.
And did you want to add in about sort of women and leadership on Native American sort of environmental justice issues? I think Pennie sort of shared a little bit about that, but I think it'd be interesting to hear kind of your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Honor the Earth is actually led by Indigenous women. Almost our entire crew is all Native women. We've got one lonely guy, and so Indigenous women is something that actually culturally is a duty to protect water. We are water keepers. It's actually a cultural responsibility to do exactly what we're doing. So I think for a lot of Indigenous women, it's not even really a question. It's actually something you're supposed to do. And you see a lot of these movements being led by women, being spearheaded by women, organized, and really kind of at the very, very front lines. It's women and children, to be quite frank. So I've seen kind of it's been really wonderful to see such a strong movement of Indigenous people that are feeling very empowered and feeling like this is really our moment to stand there and say, we've been here for a really long time. I'm glad that you guys have finally figured it out. I'm glad that everyone else is noticing that this is an issue, and we know what we're doing. We've been doing this for a very, very long time, and so we know that women are very powerful. We know that women are going to be at the very front. That these movements are the backbone is women. So it's interesting to see kind of all these different environmental advocates join us and understand that this is kind of a very established thing that we have going on, and we're very glad to see that everyone else has realized this is very, very important, and this really is our future, all of our futures, our collective future. Our efforts are not just for Indigenous people, our efforts are for the planet and for everyone.
Great. So I'm going to hand over to Dayna Jones, who actually put this program together for Law at the Margins. The Native American Law Students Association at Lewis and Clark, I believe, are watching this collectively, which I love, the idea of learning together. So I want to give them a shout out. And so we're going to go have a sort of a moderated conversation amongst each of you. I do want to leave with one question. As someone who is from Asia with a number of indigenous communities, the conversation around water, around environmental rights, is fiercely battled throughout the globe. And so, in fact, the issue of water is a huge issue. There are folk songs that say, the river knows no boundaries in Bengali. So this is something that is not unique necessarily to Native American communities, but really globally. And I know Dallas's and many of you participated in global conversations around environmental justice. And I was wondering if each of you could speak to that. How does your movement connect globally? And after that, I'm going to hand it over to Dayna to lead us in a moderated conversation. So I don't, maybe starting with Dallas and anyone else who'd like to join, how your work is connecting with, or how you are connecting with other indigenous communities around the world. Because sadly, everything that you said is applicable to indigenous communities from where I am from, in the small part of Bangladesh, has actually over 50 indigenous communities.
Yeah, I guess I can go. I think that the biggest thing, I mean, it's apparent to me, and I don't know if it's to people watching, is that the struggle that we face, that a lot of the folks that are talking here, is it's all encompassing. We're not just talking about the ecological crises that's affecting our people, but we're also talking about the economic, the social, and the spiritual crises that our communities and nations are facing because of a lot of the ecological destruction that's happening in our territories. And the greater discussion that we're having about is it's directly related because of that to colonization, the continued colonization of our lands, our territories, and our bodies as indigenous peoples. And so the resistance that we see, and it's sometimes hard for a lot of folks that are in the more mainstream environmental movement, is to understand that environmental justice is the promotion of of all of it, of our entire communities to thrive and to continue our original instructions in our relationship to Mother Earth. And that struggle it's the same when we talk to folks from Southeast Asia, or we're talking about Pacific Islander, our relatives, or we're talking about folks in the Arctic all across the globe. It's the same struggle. Is that it's a pushback towards not only these specific industries that are trying to come into the communities, or governments themselves supported by industry to infringe upon our rights and infringe upon our territories, but it's also a pushback against a system that has continuously promoted a colonial approach to subjugate us, to lessen our livelihoods, and to basically diminish who we are as indigenous peoples. So it's that universal approach, I think, that really connects, and we bond with really strongly with our indigenous relatives of the global south and other parts of the world. And I think that we're in a really amazing time right now. We have been with the advent of and the usage of social media and the internet to help us kind of dialogue and communicate between our communities and leaders and folks, to be able to understand, like, oh man, this mining company that's coming into my territory is actually the same mining company that's coming into your territory, even though we're 10,000 miles apart. Or that the economic policies that my government is using to expand development into my forest, or into our forest here, is actually being forced upon by your country in the global north. So those things are critical pieces of dialogue that helps us push back and promote this idea that as indigenous peoples overall, we're rising up and we're enacting our self-determination and our right for sovereignty.
Great. Kanahus or others would like to just respond to the global impact of your work?
Yeah, I would just like to say that, like, first of all, that I think of myself as a freedom fighter, as an indigenous freedom fighter first, before I'd ever call myself an environmental activist, because when we're talking about our territory, this is the key issue that we're talking about, is that we've never given up our territory, yet our territory is being destroyed and invaded upon. And so we have to address the underlying issue of why these companies are even allowed into our territory in the first place, and that's our land and, our sovereignty to our territory. Canada is one of the leading countries around the world for mining, so we've been connecting, with other people that are impacted by mining and people that are pushing against these mining companies here. Indigenous people, Mayan people in Vancouver that are fighting and helping their people back in their homelands, fighting against some of these big mining companies, and that's what I think is really important for is communities in resistance to be able to get together and discuss and strategize with other communities in resistance, because some things that have worked in some places may not work here in the north, but then a lot of people have a lot of skills that they could share with other communities in resistance, because a lot of times we are stuck in trial and error, and let's try this, let's see if this will work, let's do this, oh well, we met with this community and this was successful in their community. So I think it's really important to get together with other communities in resistance to strategize and continue to build this global fight for our territories and our sovereignty.
Would Pennie or Tara like to comment? And then would like Dayna to then lead us in a moderated conversation amongst our panelists.
Yeah, this is Pennie. I would just like to remind all of the viewers that you know, capitalism and colonization are new. Indigenous people have lived on Mother Earth's belly for tens of thousands of years. We were all indigenous at one time. And colonization, the whole patriarchal, hierarchical system is also fairly recent. I mean, there were many, 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 many indigenous nations that were either matriarchal or led by men and women. And when I hear these officials at different levels of business and government talk about how they are, that capitalism is set in stone, that it's something that's been going on for a very long time, I always remind folks around me that that's simply not true. Capitalism is very, very new. It's maybe a couple hundred years old. And in comparison to indigenous people living on the belly of Mother Earth in harmony and balance, following the original instructions given to them by the Creator, all of this stuff that's destroying everything is new. And because it's new, we, all human people, all Earth people, can roll that back. And we have to, it's important, I think, for people to really embody that this is a new system, you know, and that only us, it's only us, Earth people, that can roll that back. And we must do that now. And we must do it in a way that doesn't allow it to be recreated in the future. I was thinking about the Adam and Eve story. And I think about that a lot. It's, for some reason, it's really interesting to me. And how they got kicked out of their garden. And if that's a story about humans destroying something that happened a very long time ago, then they didn't tell that story very well. Because they should have said Adam and Eve totally messed up their garden and got kicked out. And so it's important as we're moving through the eye of this needle to do it in a way that creates a story for many, many generations in the future to not do this again.
Okay. Tara, did you want to add before?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so actually, it's pretty cool. I just did a grant application yesterday that's based on international principles, which is, you know, it's some of the work that we're going to be doing this year is involving the rights of nature, which is an international concept that has been very successful in some places where rivers have the right to exist, where actual land resources and water has the right to exist free of contamination. I think that those are very interesting concepts, and you know, ones that are informative for all of our work, to really say that, you know, everything that we do has an impact, and we really should be living in a way that is, you know, we're not creating a debt for the future generations. And so what we're doing with our approach to it is, you know, tribal nations in this country, in the United States, actually have a lot of sovereignty. They have a lot of rights to really kind of define what they want to do, and as we're building our nations, how do we want that to look? So how can we incorporate these rights of nature into actual tribal codes? How can we do this into a regulatory framework that actually creates certain, you know, legal implications if something were to happen to these resources that will, you know, now have rights? We're actually codifying the fact that they have rights. You know, I've seen on a larger scale, you know, the United States is not exactly receptive to international law, I've noticed. However, you know, the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples is something, on the rights of Indigenous peoples, is something that, you know, I think a lot of us look at, and it's a framework that's out there that actually provides a lot of rights for First Nations and, you know, the original peoples of this land. And is something that I think we try to incorporate and remind the United States that, hey, you maybe did not bind yourself to this agreement, but this is an agreement that talks about everything that we're fighting for, which is, our rights to exist as peoples, our rights to exist free of cultural genocide, our rights to exist in our homelands, and also generally just people's right to exist, with a access to natural resources that actually can sustain them. So I think, for anyone out there that's listening and hoping to do international law and, kind of discouraged by the fact that we don't really follow international law in the United States, I think there are ways to do it. I think there are ways to really kind of push the envelope and incorporate those international concepts into a U.S. framework. And from what we're doing at the tribal level, which I think is pretty cool. Those are sovereign nations, and those are people that are generally very concerned with the environment and, have been for a very long time. So I'm interested to see how that process works and, where it goes.
Right. So I think I invite Dayna to. We're going to have just a moderated conversation amongst the panelists. So, and then we're going to open to a Q&A for our registrants. Registrants, please share your question on the chat. You can tweet it at #lawatthemargins. It could be questions. It could be comments. And we'll be sharing that with the guests. So Dayna.
Hi, everybody. So I have a couple questions for each of you, but I'd really like to follow up with a question on what Tara was just speaking to. So Tara, you were talking about how the United States kind of has a habit of entering these non-binding treaties when it comes to climate. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more and how you see that actually changing, where the political pressure can come from, where we can put some teeth into these agreements.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was out with Pennie and Dallas, actually, at the COP21 Paris talks, and we saw a, agreement that I don't think a lot of us were very happy with, that did not do what they were there to do. I mean, it was successful in the sense that people finally reached some kind of agreement on climate change, but it wasn't what it didn't actually accomplish what we were there to accomplish, which was, there's a 2 degrees Celsius increase that we're all concerned about, and, that didn't get addressed. However, I mean, I think that it was, very powerful to see that so many countries came together and, agreed to something regarding the climate. I think that was really powerful. As far as the United States goes, I think, like I said at the very beginning, I think that we're sitting in a time now that the younger population, which is now, a very significant voting electorate, is completely aware of the climate and completely aware that this is our future. I mean, we are running out of water in several states. You're putting in new hydraulic fracturing projects as we're on water restrictions. Like, what are you thinking? And so as that becomes more and more prominent, I think that we're seeing a political body that's becoming aware of that and understands that they have to stay in office and our votes matter. Our votes are the ones that get them in there. So I'm interested to see how the U.S. kind of continues down this path of becoming aware of climate change. And really kind of addressing climate change in a very substantive way. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're starting the conversation, which is really important. And I think that there are a lot of politicians and legal makers that are now wondering, oh, maybe this is an issue that I should be briefed on. This is something that matters. My voters seem to care about this. I guess I can't say that climate change isn't real anymore. So I think that we're at a very powerful moment where our political body is really kind of figuring out that they have to listen to us.
Great, thanks, Tara. And then I wanted to actually swing over to Pennie. Pennie, could you tell us a little bit, since we're talking about political movement right now, about the Indigenous Women of America treaty we were talking about earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the seeds for the treaty were planted in Lima, Peru during the climate talks there in 2014 in December. Casey Camp Horanek, a very good friend of mine, like a sister, and a Ponca elder, had a conversation with some of the indigenous women from South America. And over a period of many, many months during 2015, several women worked on this Indigenous Women of the Americas Defending Mother Earth Treaty. And the important, for me, I mean, it lays out why indigenous women have to have a treaty, and what the details are that that are causing all of the problems, the corporate power, the laws in the governments that allow the corporations to destroy everything. And so then it goes into that we have drawn this line and the obligations to signing the treaty, which Tara has signed, and over 100 other indigenous women have signed, include a new moon ceremony every month to pray for wisdom and guidance in moving forward with this treaty, and direct actions on every solstice and equinox. So what we're asking people to do is to go to the places where the harms are occurring, or go to the physical locations of the places where the harms are being allowed to corporations that are causing the harms. And so I've taken the obligations very seriously, and every single month we have a new moon ceremony along the bay. And it has grown so fast. There's like 60 to 80 people that come every single month. So part of the ceremonies in asking for wisdom and guidance is also learning, if people don't know, how to listen for that wisdom and guidance. Because we all have the ability, when we get quiet enough in those moments in our lives. Some people are getting it driving, some people are getting it when they're in the shower or right when they wake up or in a dream, to really listen for those moments and take it to heart. And then we come together on the next new moon ceremony and talk about that. And so we're incorporating these bits of wisdom and guidance into how we move forward. And it's helping non-Indigenous people remember their connection to the sacred system of life, because that's our inherent right as human beings, to be part of the system and not separate from it. And so my goal and hope and vision is that very soon, this year or next year, there will be millions of people around the world shutting stuff down on every solstice and equinox. And we're doing it on the actual days, and so sometimes we have to leave work to do it, but we're doing it. And the big ceremony that we're planning, that I haven't even talked to all of the other treaty signers yet, is around water in September for the fall equinox. And so we plan on encouraging women, led by women around the world, to conduct prayers for the water and direct actions where the water's being harmed.
Thank you so much, Pennie. And we just got a question in that I thought it'd be great for everybody, but I really wanted Kanahus to speak to it, if you could, Kanahus, because it directly ties back into what you were saying about the jobs on the reservation and the young people getting pulled into some of these oil and gas operations that are really against everyone's own interests. So the question says, hello, I'm glad to be able to hear all of you today. Thank you for this. My question is, I live on a reservation which generates its main revenue from oil and gas companies and distributes a dividend to all enrolled members. My question is, how would you all go about trying to change the thinking? And Kanahus, could you please go ahead and speak to this first?
Well, I'm not here to dictate or anything on how everybody should live their lives or the direction they should take, but I really believe in prayer and going into your spirit and soul and intuitively and instinctually of like what's in our DNA and how we feel about these issues. One thing that I can do is sort of tell you how I lead by example in my community in the push for decolonization. And decolonization and pulling away from capitalism and consumerism and everything that is full decolonization, not registering my children with the Canadian government. They don't have tribal IDs, they don't have birth certificates, live in an underground pit house on an earth floor with no electricity or running water because we choose to. We choose to not be a part of the system that much that we'll do whatever extreme measures to get out of that type of dependency on them. So when we talk about sovereignty, we talk about being independent from the state. And when you look at that, and yeah, there's people that have a lot of that money, but what can you do with that money to invest it into the direct frontline fight? Because we have a lot of things that we need to purchase for our fight, because this is a big fight that we're up against, big monster here. And not that I believe in taking corporate money for the sake of just spending it on anything, but we have to be strategic in the way that we utilize any type of resources. You know, some communities will just totally refuse money from corporate entities like that. So you really have to look into yourself, but I believe that the young people need to take a fierce stance, because you look at our young people growing up in our Women's Warrior Society, Native Youth Movement, like, to take that fierce stance and show no fear. We can't have no fear of even the Canadian laws that are put in place to oppress us, or else we're continue to be oppressed.
Thank you. And then I actually wanted to also swing it over to Dallas to see if you could give us some input on this.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question, because for a lot of communities, it's a hard conversation to have, whether you're in the frack lands of Eastern Agency of Navajo territories, or in the coal areas of Black Mesa, or up in the Bakken region and tribal of the 3 affiliated tribes, and numerous of other tribes from Alaska down to the Gulf of Mexico, who their tribal economies are dependent upon fossil fuels. They have a lot of relatives that work in the industry. And you know I think what has to be clarified from the get-go, as far as the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I know a lot of folks here stand on, is what we're asking for is a just transition. That we know where we want to be, and we know that where we're at right now is a short path to destruction for our communities. It's a path where our folks have to deal with asthma. They have to deal with sexual violence because of man camps. They have to deal with all this other destruction for a limited benefit for the benefit of capitalism. And where we want to be is vibrant, resilient communities, localized economies. And so we have to advocate for just transition. We have to advocate for our uncles, our brothers, our mothers, our sisters, who their jobs depend on the industry to help them transition, so they have jobs, they can continue to have income. And I think that, you know, I really just want to push back, because I had a really good conversation with a tribal leader from 3 affiliated tribes up in North Dakota, and he's a good friend of mine. But we stand on 2 sides of the issue, and for him, you know, he's a local leader. He's on the tribal council, and his approach was, well, oil is no different than our traditional medicines. As long as we practice, as long as we, you know, go about it and regulate it properly, as long as we, you know, take it in a better way, you know, then it's no different than our traditional medicines, which we gather and we just extract it from our surroundings. And I was like, I pushed back strongly at that. I said, well, gathering traditional medicines is not going to cause the water to be poisoned. It's not going to cause increased risks of cancer in your community, like fracking may do in your community. So it's a time for us as tribal nations to really take some sincere discussion about where is the future goal for us, and how do we get our communities to the place where we need to be, and not reliant on fossil fuels. And I think it's a whole setup. It's just a continuation of the same system where we're forced to make bad decisions. And I think a lot of leaders, tribal leaders, grassroots leaders, are tired of we're forced into a tough decision to make bad choices that impacts the future, and you know, can destroy the future of our communities.
Thank you so much. Those were great points from everybody. And we actually have a participant that was able to log on, and she wants to ask you a question. So Layla, it's over to you.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Layla Locklear, and I'm calling in from Pembroke, North Carolina, Lumbee, Oglala, Lakota, and Tuscarora. And my question is, what kind of things could I do here in my community to make my people and educate them, you know, make them more aware of these companies that are trying to come in and destroy our lands and try to take our resources over. And you know, before you do respond, we do currently have a committee that has been newly formed, and we called it Eco Robinson, and we're trying to get the word out there to our community members about what's going on with our water, because like I said in the chat, that our community members do not know, because we are out of the mainstream loop. We haven't had to barge in on any kind of meetings or corporate discussions, or things like that. So they are uneducated. So what would you suggest for our groups and us, as individuals working in the community?
Layla, is there anybody you wanted to directly answer that question first, or do we have any panelists who would like to jump in?
Yeah, that's an open. It's open to anyone there. Doesn't matter who wants to start first.
I'll start.
Okay.
Hi there. How are you doing? I'm glad you joined our call.
Thank
I
you.
just want to say, like, as a young person, how I got involved was really through being born into the movement, but also Native Youth Movement was a really a key way for us to organize our young people in our community, and that's what really inspired me, is seeing like other young people standing up in the community and just speaking their mind and addressing these issues in public. And a lot of times, like, even for our community, it was all trial and error. What's going to work in our community might not work in the next reservation over. But I know that a lot of times you can't just go outright with camouflage and masks up and go into these shareholders meetings and just say no. A lot of times that'll turn some of our more neutral people off. So, like Pennie was talking about the ceremonies, that's a really good way, I feel, to start bringing the community in, to start talking about this in a way that doesn't feel threatening to people that might just be neutral, or people that might be leaning on more side of the jobs. Ceremony and things like that, like the walks, the prayer walks, and things. We've done those in our community as well, and we've organized big community feasts and indigenous assemblies, brought other communities, impacted communities in to talk about these issues, and really is just to really educate yourself so you could become an expert in talking about the subject that we're discussing here, whatever industry it may be, and the impacts that directly has on our people. And the women and the children, like you heard some of the panelists talk, are always leading the forefront of our movement, and because it inspires people. When we see our aunties out there and our grandmothers out there and mothers with all these children out there, you're saying, okay, I could bring my kids too, and I could stand there too. And so there's so much good things that all these communities are doing, but that's my little bit, and I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that too. A lot of people, I mean, that's kind of like always the question, right? Is how can I help? What can I do? I've seen actually, in communities, there are oftentimes, someone earlier was asking about, what about communities that are pro fracking and pro, doing these extractive projects. Oftentimes you'll see a tribal government that's at odds with its own people. So there'll be community members that are very opposed to the things that are happening within their nations, and there are community members that are very opposed to supporting these type of projects. And then from that, I've seen a lot of organizations actually spring up from within the community. Tiny little grassroots efforts that are, folks that have decided to say, I don't care what my tribal government says. I'm gonna, stand up for what's right. I've seen a lot of grassroots organizing. I think that's what you really can do. You don't. I think that everyone is capable of having a voice and, really standing up and saying this is wrong. And so you can either do that, if you want to pick up a picket sign, you can do that, or if you want to, go and lobby your own tribal government, if you want to speak to your state lawmakers, to your federal lawmakers, there are ways that you can do these things, just as on your own. And I'm sure there are other people that feel the same way that you do. And so, actions within your community is you create your own movement. You don't have to, it doesn't have to necessarily be a whole nonprofit organization. I mean, it really can just be a couple folks getting together and doing a ceremony like Pennie was talking about, making a very public stance and saying that we support these things and this is where we care about our futures. We're not gonna allow this to happen.
Right, and being involved, outside of my community, even on that global movement level, especially with the climate march being in New York. I had a chance to participate in that. So just bringing that in itself to my community, and knowing that our aunties and our mothers are the backbones to kind of help make that happen. And that our water is important, and all of that. It's like I know that, and we have other members in our community that are aware of that too. But it's like that in itself is on a completely different level than the rest of my community. It's like they haven't even thought about that piece yet. So, but it's like that was already intact. So it's like getting them up to speed. Basically.
Thank you, Layla, for your question, and thank you, everybody, for answering it so well. And I wanted to shoot a question over to Pennie that Sarah has asked. And her question was, I'm interested to know how much support any of you are getting from the big conservation organizations. And Pennie, I wanted you to address this just because I know your refinery walks are a collaboration with 350.org also, so you might be able to give some positive input, but then also let us know if there's any kind of pushback on these issues that you feel everybody could benefit from knowing.
Yeah, so 350.org pays for all the travel and the lodging for our frontline guests to come to the refinery healing walks, and we're really, really grateful for that. So during each walk, we have someone that we bring in who's being impacted by the fossil fuel industry. This last walk, it was Sharif Pointland from Louisiana. Deborah Parker's coming up from Washington, from Lummi, and anyway, I could go on, but so, and also the Sierra Club gave us $1,000. Greenpeace has been super supportive in a number of different ways. We've done a lot of the art parties to make the banners and flags at their warehouse, and there are also these big NGOs. Oh, we also work very, very closely with Amazon Watch, and of course IEN and all the indigenous organizations that are doing similar work. There are also these other big NGOs that are supporting projects like RED. The World Wildlife Fund is one of them. I was at a meeting, a scoping meeting in the state of California, and I was looking over to see who was at that meeting, and of course it was all of the big fossil fuel corporations and big agriculture, but it was also like the Nature Conservancy was there, and the World Wildlife Fund was there, and there were these other organizations, and it made me have to stop and think, like, well, who's going to benefit from a carbon trading scheme, like Ponzi scheme, that why would they be there? And some of these big NGOs have purchased large tracts of rainforests around the world, and so now we're at a point where the air that those rainforests clean can be sold. It's quantified and it's being sold to Chevron, which I see out my window every single day, and these other big polluters. And so I think it's important that we kind of look behind the curtains to see what's going on with a lot of these big NGOs that are supported by mainstream people who just trust that they're doing the right thing, and a lot of them are not doing the right thing at this point in time when we need everyone to be on the same page to preserve life as we know it on this beautiful planet.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, my partner came in and the dog started barking. I forgot. That was a really beautiful answer, Pennie. Does anybody else want to speak to that before I move on to the next question?
I guess I can speak to it. There are, I know that for the question that came from it in the chat, they were talking about goal, which is a coalition to help protect the grizzly bears. As far as I understand, I don't know if there's other aspects of the work that they do, and it's amazing work that needs to be done. There are organizations like the Western Organization Resource Council who does a lot of work in the Western states, and I've worked with the Dakota Rural Action, who is the organization in South Dakota. Those are some good resources and connections with folks that are not only doing broad support work, but also are very grounded in the areas that they come from. And that's usually the criticism of big green conservation groups is how connected are they, and how invested are they into those communities on the ground. And that's a question that we, as like the work I do in IEN, my job is primarily working with a lot of big NGO organizers work, and then folks on the grassroots communities on the ground. And so a lot of that work is also trying to keep them accountable and to call them out for some of the BS that they do as a big green and not being true supporters of those on the front lines. And so there are conservation groups that we don't see eye to eye, and there's other folks that are really strong allies. And in that ally relationship, there's still room for us to offer critique or offer suggestions of how they can do better work, ally work, and better support work for frontline communities. So that's just my thoughts on it, is that it's not an easy open door once you build those allyships. It's a continuing process of engagement.
Definitely. Thank you, Dallas. And then I'm going to move on to another question from Daniel. The question is, there are current federal initiatives relating to environmental protection, such as the BLM and EPA methane rules and the fracking rules, that might be useful to tribal communities. How do we get tribal governments to support more regulation on tribal lands without making tribes think those rules hurt the economy? And I'd also like to ask, do you think that that's a good job, like a good road to pursue, I should say? And Tara, you've been traveling to reservations all around the country as part of the Sanders campaign, so I think you probably could speak to a lot of just overall experience of talking to tribal governments. Could you go ahead and address this question?
Yeah, sure. Actually, most of my experience with tribal governments is as a tribal attorney, and working in that capacity, which I think is relevant to this particular question. And I did actually answer it in the chat. So I guess I would start by saying, tribes are not a monolith. There are 567 federally recognized tribes in this country, and so there are many tribes that are very aware that regulation is important and needed and necessary. I don't think that tribes are, looking at it from that framework is a kind of paternalistic way to put things. Tribes can think for themselves. They're capable of doing that. However, I think it is also important, a lot of the work that Dallas is doing with Keep It in the Ground is, telling tribal governments about these potential hooks and potential ways to protect their own homelands. I think it's important to let tribes know that these things are happening. And I think, unfortunately, the situation for a lot of tribal governments is that they just simply don't have the resources or the capacity to follow every single piece of legislation and understand every single legal hook. And that's where folks like us come in and let them know, hey, you have these potential tools that could be really beneficial. I think there are tribes. I've actually worked on the other side of things as well, where tribes look at regulations, very strict regulations, as impacting economic development, and sometimes it does. Sometimes it really does, and that's a call that a tribal government has to make. Am I going to support hydraulic fracturing on my reservation, or am I going to go the other way and support a very strict, environmental protection stance? And that's on each tribe to make. It really is. I'm always hopeful that they're going to choose the right way, which is the way of the eighth fire, but not every tribal nation is going to do that. I mean, they're really not, and that's their right to do that. That is their sovereign right to do that. So I think it's important to keep both of those principles in mind.
Thank you, Tara. Did anybody else want to talk before I move on to our last question?
I just want to say, to add on to it, is another method that people can contribute to the climate justice movement and us stepping away from fossil fuels is to ask the tribe, and if you're a tribal leader, is look in divesting from fossil fuels. I think there's a lot of tribal governments out there that have a pretty substantial economic portfolio that may not be in fossil fuel country per se, but having a critical conversation about saying how are we as a tribal nation investing in fossil fuels, and can we divest from supporting it? I think that's I know a lot of students across the country. There's a major divestment campaign happening across college campuses across the country, getting colleges to divest from fossil fuels. And I think that continuing to look at those alternative systems that work for you as a tribal nation is always good. And I think regulations can be a strong approach to address the problem. But overall, we have to look at what does our alternative localized economy look like for if you're in the Midwest or the Southwest or in the Gulf Coast or wherever it may be. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to address that? We're good? Okay. Then it's actually almost time for us to end. So I wanted to see if everybody could wrap up with just a sentence or two, a call to action. A lot of the Law at the Margins viewer base is social justice oriented, but maybe not so versed in Native American issues of environmental justice. This is a really important program because it's something that our viewer base is not necessarily really familiar with already. So starting with Kanahus, and then we'll go to Pennie, Dallas, and then Tara. Could everyone just give us a sentence or two takeaway that you would like our viewers to walk away with from this program?
Yes, that this our war cry for our freedom is urgent. We have no other choice but to stand up and fight back. This responsibility as human beings, we can't let this go on any further, and we really have to pick up the pace and really take an even stronger stance than we are all taking to defend our planet, defend Mother Earth. And find us on Facebook at Imperial No More. We're going to be shutting down the shareholders meeting, the AGM. We're going to be shutting down these mines and start taking back our land. So Clcik SHOW.
You can go ahead, Pennie. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Dallas was going next. I'm sitting there smiling really big at Kanahus.
Beautiful.
I'm so looking forward to meeting you sometime sooner or later. So I just want to encourage everyone to do anything that you can. If it's just standing on a street in your area with a sign that says, I'm concerned about this, and come join me. And if you do it like at certain times every week, people will start joining you. That's been my experience. Like, you put it out there. For me, it always comes from my heart, and people will come. Well, if you're doing something that is good and proper and in alignment with the times that we live in, people will show up. It might only be one person to start out with. It might be a whole lot of people, but that's what's being required of us. You might be standing out there with your hand shaking. I've done that too, and your mouth dry when you try to talk. I've been there and done that too. But what's important now is that we all become fearless warriors for this sacred system of life on our beautiful, beautiful Mother Earth. And so if not doing anything yet, it's time to do it now.
Okay, now is it my turn? My turn?
You're on.
Okay. I just want to say that we've demonstrated, and it's a collective we, that the power is in the people. The power is in our hands as frontline communities, as grassroots communities, as students, as mothers, as fathers, and that social movements can have lasting, sustained change. Can make lasting, sustained change, and that this movement that we're a part of right now, the climate justice movement, this environmental justice movement, as I said earlier, is all-encompassing. It's us trying to say we want something better for our lives, we want something better for our communities. And for those that are naysayers that say that's not practical, that's not possible, the purpose of a social movement is to make what's politically real more in line with where you want to be. Given the fact that we just had a democratic debate between two people are potentially running for president, and the discussion was keep it in the ground and the necessity for us to address climate change with a wartime effort approach. it demonstrates the power of this social movement, that we made that happen. Black Lives Matter, to have political leaders talk about Black Lives Matter and the importance of that is because of social movements. And so for us to diminish it, we cannot allow others to diminish that power. And each one of us have a part to play in this. And so I just want to encourage each and every one to continue to rise up, to speak out, whether you're a law student or you're just a really passionate community leader. And we all have a part to play in this for the protection of Mother Earth and for our relationship with Mother Earth. That's it.
Thank you.
Does that mean it's me now?
That's on you, Tara.
Okay. I guess I wanted to add to the law students that are, in their legal studies right now and probably going crazy because we're getting close to finals. If you are environmentally passionate and really want to work in this area, it's very important to keep in mind that tribes have treaty rights, and treaty rights are very powerful. It's something that I've seen, the big greens kind of realize over these last few years that, tribes have these sovereign rights that are very, very powerful and can really create a lot of protection for the planet and a lot of support for these movements. And if you're not a law student and if you're just like a, grassroots organizer or activist or whatever it is, I think it's important to, remember that we all are, fighting together and that every voice matters and we should all be included in the conversation. And that, to me, I think it's very powerful to talk about human beings that are on the front lines, not just polar bears. It really is. And to remember that we're all fighting together and that we can learn from one another and we can share and we can become more powerful together. All these coalitions of color and of environmentalists and people that just really are concerned about our futures, I mean, that's how we're really going to get change made. That is how we're going to, move into the next economy of, renewables and saving our planet and realizing that drinking water actually matters and we're not going to be wasting it on hydraulic fracturing or whatever it is. I mean, that's how we're really going to get there, is together. And joining forces, and together we're a lot stronger. So everyone get out there, grab a sign, do whatever you're going to do.
Great. Thank you all so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Chaumtoli. I just really wanted to say thank you. I know we've had a lot of emails back and forth, and you're an incredible group. You have just blessed my heart so much with hearing you all speak today. So just wanted to say thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
So thank you, Dayna, for putting this together. And I think Law at the Margins is about a collective and a collaborative space for law and social justice. It's about bringing the voices of the front lines. And I can't tell you how much today's conversation embodies just that. You can't just talk the talk, you have to live it. And I think today I am so glad that I didn't have to moderate, because I was so excited to hear everything from just the fierce warriors, protectors of the earth, women leading, the integral part of environment, politics, colonialism, all the things sort of coming together. So I want to thank Kanahus, Dallas, Tara, Pennie for participating. But in particular, I want to thank each of our guests and participants who are also on the front lines. Just because your face is not being shown on the webcam doesn't mean that your work is not being acknowledged. The transcript of this is going to be recorded. So again, thank you also to the Native American Law Students Association at Lewis and Clark. I understand that they got up early on a Friday morning and they're watching this. It gives me hope as an attorney that maybe we might have movement lawyers that are in the making. And then the last thing I just wanted to share is that I encourage each of you to let us know what we could do to continue the work. I saw studies that showed that Native American foundation giving to Native American groups is the lowest, meaning that foundations collectively do not give to Native American organizing. So this is something that Law at the Margins is committed and pledged to change and to work on specifically. If you have thoughts on that, please let us know. This is recorded, so please show this to your students, have discussions, have small groups. This will be made available. And again, Thank you to each of you. Thank you to Dayna, the Native American Law Students Association, to our esteemed panelists, Kanahus, Dallas, Tara, and Pennie. We're going to sign off, and you can find us at lawatthemargins.com. Thank you.